I'm Peripheric with Consequence of Sound and Heavy Consequence, and today we have vocalist of Touché Amoré, Jeremy Bolm. You've released a few singles from your upcoming album, Lament. It's a follow-up to 2016 Stage 4 and exists as sort of a companion album.
Yeah, it feels that way.
Where Stage 4 kind of focused on trauma and stuff you're going through, Lament shows you trying to exist with the trauma that lives in the corner of every room. So how did you decide to go in that direction? Like, kind of creating an album that exists in the same world as the previous one?
I mean, it just, whenever I start writing a record, it's whatever I'm going through or what is on my mind at that time. And, I didn't set out to be like, oh, I need to write a companion piece to this record. It was more like, this is what my life is now, 4 years removed from the release of that record, and how that record has affected me. There's no songs specifically, like, for example, that are like about my mom the way Stage 4 is, whereas this record is more how I've been dealing with things since the release of the record and how that record has impacted my life personally.
There's a couple songs that come to mind that are kind of talking about your experience releasing that album. I'll Be Your Host and the final track of Forecast.
I feel like I'll Be Your Host, Deflector, and Forecast. Like, it's like a 3-hit punch of the last end of the record, really tying off my life since then,
With I'll Be Your Host, you talk about how people interact with your art and connect to it, but how in a way they're appointing you as a spokesperson or a host for grappling with trauma.
That's sort of the whole struggle of the whole situation, where it's like, if you're connected to something personally that an artist puts out, I completely understand the motivation to want to share that with the person who created it. I completely get it. I likely have done the same thing. You want to let the person know how that art has, helped you or made you feel, not so alone in the situation. Like, I completely get it. I can't give anybody any, sort of a hard time for doing that. But it's a tough road for the person who's having that constantly being put on them, because, it's not something pleasant, and it's not something that you necessarily want to be reminded of every day, whether it's through being on tour and someone approaches me and wants to talk to me about it, or through like DMing me on social media and things like that. It's a tough thing to even have feelings about in my shoes, because like I said, like, I get why people do it. I understand and I respect it, but it's not fun to have to like sit through every single day, because it's like triggering in a way for me, because it's like, I'm trying to go through my day and not have to sit in a world of tragedy and devastation, so that song for me is just like me kind of getting these feelings out of, like, the guilt of feeling bad about maybe not responding to somebody. Like, I don't often respond, if ever, to when people reach out to me about that stuff. A lot of times I leave it on unread, because I just don't know how to respond. How many times can you really, it's like, I don't really know what to say. I think the biggest problem is because when someone pours that stuff on me, like, I rarely have a good response for it, other than I'm sorry, or like, I apologize that you've also had to go through that. My condolences, because I certainly don't have the answers. I fucking wrote a whole record about not having the answers for it, it's like the guilt of not knowing how to process someone else's thing, while understanding why they're giving it to me. Like, I get it. So yeah, it's a really hard thing to balance that I still don't know how to balance.
And it's a cool thing to bring up that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about with their music.
I mean, it comes with how accessible musicians are these days. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a blessing and a curse because, you know, I find it interesting that, for example, if we put up a pre-order for a record, people who are buying the record will comment on like the members of the band's page being like, the page isn't loading. When is this going to be available? Blah, blah. And I'm just like, there's a whole the web store has like a contact section. Like, I don't have the answers for like how the web store works. I'm just in the band, you know, but it comes with like that level of accessibility where there's really there's no privacy anymore for anything. You know, it's like you feel like you could reach out to anybody and ask them anything, which again, I'm guilty of, you know, having a podcast now. Like, there's been one or two people that I've DM'd or reached out to see if they'd be on the show, and they go unread, and I completely understand it. You know, I have to respect the privacy.
You touch on that a little bit on the album's closer forecast. It touches on how people close to you interacted with the music, how you kind of put your feelings out there, and like they exist in this kind of static state, how the current administration has impacted your life and your relationships, anxieties that I'm sure we're all feeling a lot right now. But there's a couple of lines on that song that I think are really poignant. It's like obviously a super bitter song, but the lines, I found the patience for jazz. I still love the Coen brothers. I love that shit so much that it has this little retrieval of like, I'm still this person with the old interests, and I'm also finding room to grow.
When I was writing that, I found it important to not just hit you with, you know, sad line after sad line after sad line or devastating situation. You know, I was like, this is a song about like what my life is right now, you know? And I think that for people that are familiar with, you know, myself and whatever, like I've always been an outward film fanatic. Like I have a whole leg tattooed of like Coen brothers tattoos. Like I'm a fanatic for that stuff. And then I've been very outward with like my jazz journey, you know, like I've started to delve into it a couple of years ago, and I'm still on that journey, and I'm loving every moment of it, every new record that I buy. But like, you know, I think it's important to like, you know, juxtapose, you know, that not everything is bleak, that just because I may write about a lot of heavy topics doesn't mean that that's not all I am. You know, I'm a relatively happy person, you know, but art is, you know, like the music that I make is where I'm able to get out these things, you know? So I think it's, for me, I looked at it like a good way to sort of pull back the curtain a little bit and be like, you know, I'm a normal person as well. Like I'm enjoying my life just as much as I'm struggling with it, you know?
And you really kind of showcase that on this album, because the last album, it's a concept album, very targeted, very focused. On this one, you do a lot of shit, dude. It's fucking cool. Like you got that melodic hardcore, like pop punk track, Reminders. You got like a ukulele lap steel led country downer, a broadcast. After doing such focused work, it's really refreshing to see this.
It all, you know, it all just kind of came natural with when we were writing. Like Nick, from our guitar player, started learning how to play lap steel and pedal steel, and got really excited about it, and was like, you know, we brought up having him do it on the record. So the whole outro of Limelight is played with like a lap steel and pedal steel. I forget which one. Nick will probably kill me for not knowing the difference. And then Broadcast was written completely like Nick wrote the whole thing on the instrument, and then we brought it to practice, and then we figured out how to, you know, give it a verse and a chorus and an outro and all that sort of stuff. And obviously working with Ross Robinson, like he sort of gave it a lot more life too. And Fane, you're talking about, Reminders you're talking about. Reminders went through so many different changes that, like, it's funny, we even called that song, or I've mostly me referred to that song as like the cursed song, because it went through so many changes, and it was like, the song that we almost scrapped once or twice because we like couldn't get it to work. And when we actually went into the studio, first day, you know, once everything was set up, Ross was like, all right, where do you guys want to start? And our first, you know, our response was like, let's start with Come Heroin. It's the first song on the record. We know it's the first song on the record. Because at that time we knew Come Heroin started, Forecast ended. That the rest in between wasn't decided yet. But I was like, let's start with Come Heroin. Like, we love the song. We feel great about the song. Like, it's, you know, it's all there. And Ross was like, why don't we start with the song you have the worst trouble with? Let's start with the song that you're like having a hard time getting. I remember just thinking, like, you want to start with like in like the worst vibe, the worst mood possible, where like we're all going to be like stressed out and whatever. And he was like, well, yeah, because it's only going to go up from there. It's only going to feel better after we get the song out of the way. It's like, wow, okay, that's a really smart way to look at it. And then Ross just completely, you know, gave it a whole new life and made it to what it is now. You know, with like repeated choruses and the outro, like going to like the tom part, like all these different things. And yeah, so it ended up really, really, really taking on a life. And now it's, you know, one of the songs I'm most proud of on that record. I think it's like it's an accomplishment getting that, I guess, like hooky of a chorus, which I never thought we could really accomplish. But early on with that song, I remember when we were in the studio, I remember thinking like, I really want to have like a woman's voice to accompany me on the choruses. So then that was, you know, that's when Julian came in and, you know, just crushed it hard once again for us, like she did in Skyscraper. But yeah, man, we're all super proud of that song. It turned out really, really, really wonderful.
Before we touch on the single Limelight, I'd like to ask about the video. Creative direction and animation was done by your guitarist, Nick Steinhardt, edited by Ryan Sanders. Your website calls it the first piece from the Lament visual album. Are we going to see more videos from them?
Yeah. I mean, it's if you've been following the band, you realize that art is as much of a part of this band as the music is. And Nick really, really, really went above and beyond with this record in a lot of ways. And so with the deluxe version of the record that's coming out, you know, it's a 70-odd page book featuring a bunch of different sort of works built upon photography from George from the band Deaf Heaven, who did all the photography for the record. And like they collaborated really, really closely on it. And so with all those different visuals, Nick was able to build these really beautiful, you know, animated videos for the record. So we're going to have, each song will have its own sort of visual for each track.